Today, we're gonna discuss Dylan Thomas's poem, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. The British writer and poet Dylan Thomas wrote this poem in 1947 when his father was extremely ill. At the time, Thomas thought his father is dying. The poem, however, wasn't published until 1951. Then, sadly for Thomas, a year after the poem's publication in 1952, his father passed away. Now, when it comes for the poem's title, the poem itself doesn't have a title, but the given title, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, is actually its first and most repeated line. It was more of a message from Thomas to his father, whom Thomas thought is on his deathbed. However, no one can prove that it was actually written for his father. As I mentioned, the poem starts with the most important and most repeated line, which is do not go gentle into that good night. Now, good night here means death, and the poet says, fight and resist death. Do not go gentle into that good night. Do not just accept it and die without a fight. Now, the use of good night, I believe using good night here indicates that death may look like a good option for someone who is suffering. Then the poet says that all people who are on their deathbed shouldn't die quietly. Rather, they should fight and resist death. The third line is also repeated as many times as the first line, and they have the same meaning. The third line describes death as dying of the light, which is actually very similar to the image we see in the first line, because in night, the light fades away. So it's the dying of the light also. Then, the following four stanzas talk about different types of people and how they view death and why they do not go gentle into that good night. The first type of people is wise men. Wise men know that dark is right, which means they know that death is the natural end for every living creatures, including humans. However, knowing that their words haven't made the difference they want to see in the world, they fight death. Then we have good men, who when the last wave, yet another way of describing death, comes, they refuse death. They think there are many good things they haven't done yet, and that death will stop them from doing. Then the third type of people is wild men, who also refuse death because on their deathbed they realize all the grief they caused living their life recklessly. The last type of people mentioned in the poem is grave men. Although they're getting weaker and losing their sight, they use whatever power they still have to make sure they fight death, and at least not dying in silence. Therefore, the message here is that no one wishes to die, no matter who those people are or what they do in their lives. What's common between all those types of people is that they all realize things way too late. They realize them on their deathbed, which means their realization caused their resistance. Then in the last stanza, Thomas turns the conversation directly into his father. We can see two opposite words are being used, which are curse and bless. This takes us to two repeated ideas through the poem. The first is that death is the end of everything, while the second is that death is something people hate and fight. Just like the two words, two ideas are also opposites. Then the poet asks his father to not go gentle into that good night and to rage against the dying of the light. As we can clearly see and tell, the main theme in the poem is resisting death. Thomas keeps repeating, do not go gentle into that good night, and rage against the dying of the light, because he wants his father to fight and to resist death. Something else about the poem is that it is full of intense emotions. Because as we mentioned, Thomas wrote it for his father, and Thomas here feels sad and doesn't want his father to die. Ironically, Dylan Thomas himself died young at the age of 39. Romanticism is all about nature, about being in nature and being one with nature. So death itself isn't something bad. It is actually something good. Because when people die, they become one with nature. This oneness with nature is the highest form of romanticism. Because now you're not just in nature, you are the nature itself. Now when it comes to modernism, death is something bad. Because there is nothing after death for a modernist. Always remember that modernists lack faith. But there is absolutely nothing to do to stop death. Therefore, they just sit and accept death. So, if the poem were a modernist poem, it wouldn't call for resisting death. Also, if it was a romantic poem, it would welcome death, not being upset about it. So the poem is a postmodernist poem because it is about resisting death, not just welcoming it. Even if we can't stop it, we should fight it. The similarity between modernism and postmodernism here is that death is something bad, but the difference is in whether we can fight it or not. When reading the poem for the first time, we notice some of its interesting features. One of them is that the poem consists of 19 lines, and every 3 lines of which make a stanza, with the rhyme A, B, A. We can see in the first stanza that the first line ends with the sound ait, so it's an A. The second line ends with the sound A, so it's a B. And the third line ends with the sound ait, so it's an A. Again, it's A, B, A. This repeats in all stanzas until the last one. So all stanzas except the last one ends with the same rhyme and have the same number of lines. Unlike other stanzas, the last stanza consists of 4 lines with the rhyme A, B, A. So it's ait, A, ait, ait. Another thing to notice is that the last 2 lines in the poem, which are do not go gentle into that good night and rage against the dying of the light, are repeated throughout the poem. Each one of those 2 lines is repeated 4 times, which means that 8 lines of the poem are repetitions of the same 2 lines. This repetition serves the purpose of emphasizing the main idea, which is here fighting death. Thus, the poem is a great example of a villanelle, which is originally a French form of poetry. All things from the repetition of lines, the number of lines, the rhyme of the lines are all features of a villanelle. The first and the most obvious literary device is metaphor. In the poem, good night and dying of the light, which were repeated 8 times, are 2 metaphors for one thing, for death. Another literary device that is very similar to a metaphor is simile. The main difference is that Unlike metaphors, similes use linking words. An illustration of it is blind eyes could blaze like meters and be gay. As you can see, the word like is used as a linking word. We can also find alliteration, which is the repetition of similar consonant sounds. Some of the examples are the repetition of the sound ga and do not go gentle into that good night. So go, good. The sound s and sand and the sun, sand the sun. The sound l and learn and late and learn too late. And the B sound in blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meters and be gay. So blinding, blind, blaze, B. Another literary device is personification, in which inanimate things are given human traits. The poet uses it when he said that good people's frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Deeds are inanimate things. Have you ever seen a deed walking? Of course not. But here, deeds danced. So they are giving human traits. In addition to the repetition of the two lines, in one of them, the word rage is repeated twice. Repeating the same word for effect is actually a literary device called anaphora. Last but not least, when it comes to the word choice, both good night and dying of the light were used as metaphors for death. Using mild words to express harsh ideas or things is also another literary device.